The storm raged outside the Juniper Ridge Research Station, sheets of rain hammering against reinforced windows as lightning split the sky. Dr. Nathan Walsh rubbed his tired eyes, the holographic data streams before him blurring into meaningless patterns. Another late night studying anomalous biological signatures detected in the surrounding forest, another dead end. The facility's AI chirped an alert. Warning, unidentified biological signature detected within facility perimeter. Signature does not match known terrestrial patterns. Nathan's heart raced. After 3 years of searching for proof of extraterrestrial life, could tonight be different? He grabbed his medkit and rain gear, more out of habit than expectation. The security feeds showed nothing but rain-swept darkness. The moment he stepped outside, the wind nearly knocked him off his feet. His boots splashed through puddles as he followed the AI's guidance, the bioscanner on his wrist pulsing stronger with each step. The signal led him to the edge of the research station's boundary, where the manicured grounds gave way to wild forest. There, crumpled beneath a massive oak tree, lay a figure that stopped Nathan's breath. A woman, but unlike any he'd ever seen. Her skin was a deep, iridescent blue that seemed to shimmer even in the darkness. She wore what appeared to be some kind of environmental suit, now torn and damaged. Dark fluid, blood, seeped from several wounds. Nathan's training kicked in. He knelt beside her, checking vital signs. Her pulse was weak but present, though it beat in an odd rhythm. Her skin felt cool to the touch, but he couldn't tell if that was normal for her species or a sign of shock. "Hey," he said softly, not sure if she could even understand Earth languages. "I'm here to help." Her eyes fluttered open, revealing irises of swirling silver. She spoke, her voice barely a whisper, in what sounded like multiple tones at once. A small device at her throat flickered weakly, and suddenly her words became clear. "Please, they're hunting me. Don't turn me in." The facility AI's voice cut through the rain. "Mandatory protocol reminder. All unregistered alien life forms must be reported to Earth Defense Force immediately. Failure to comply is punishable by up to 20 years imprisonment." Nathan looked at the injured woman, then at his comm unit. The right thing to do, the legal thing, would be to call it in. But as a scientist, he'd sworn an oath to preserve life. And something in those silver eyes called to him, awakening protective instincts he didn't know he had. "AI, begin data purge of last 10 minutes of security footage," he commanded, lifting the alien woman as gently as he could. She weighed surprisingly little, her breath coming in short gasps. "Delete all records of unknown biological signature. Warning, this action violates multiple regulations. Authorization Walsh Delta 79. Execute purge." The AI fell silent as Nathan carried her toward the facility's medical bay. He knew his career, his freedom, could end tonight. But looking down at this mysterious woman who had literally fallen from the stars, he couldn't bring himself to regret his choice. She stirred slightly in his arms, her silver eyes meeting his. "Why?" she whispered. "Your kind fears mine." Nathan managed a small smile as he shouldered open the medbay doors. Maybe it's time that changed. He laid her carefully on an examination bed, already planning how to modify the medical equipment for her alien physiology. "I'm Nathan. And I promise, you're safe here." Her translator crackled again as she slipped into unconsciousness. "Vyra, my name is Vyra." As Nathan began treating her wounds, his mind raced with questions. Who was she? What was she running from? And how long could he keep her hidden in a facility designed to detect alien life? The storm raged on outside, but in that moment, he knew his own life had just become far more turbulent than any earthly weather. Rain drummed against the windows, nature's rhythm accompanying the soft beep of modified medical monitors. Nathan Walsh, who had spent his life searching the stars for answers, now found himself keeping the biggest secret in human history. And somehow, watching the slow rise and fall of Vira's chest as her condition stabilized, he knew he'd made the right choice. 3 days passed like a fever dream. Nathan converted his private lab into a makeshift recovery room, rerouting security feeds and fabricating research data to explain his sudden reclusiveness. Each morning brought new challenges as he struggled to understand Vira's unique biology while keeping her presence hidden from the rest of the facility's staff. On the 4th day, Vira was strong enough to sit up and really talk. Her translator, now repaired, rendered her multi-tonal voice into crisp English. "My people call themselves the Lasari," she explained, absently touching the luminescent markings that traced her blue skin like constellations. "We were once renowned across the galaxy for our bioengineering achievements." "Were?" Nathan asked, checking her vital signs with equipment he'd modified based on her guidance. Vira's silver eyes clouded. "Everything changed when the mutation began appearing. A handful of us developed this." She gestured to her blue skin. "The general population's pigmentation is pale green." The change wasn't just cosmetic, it came with heightened cognitive abilities, enhanced cellular regeneration. Some called it the next step in our evolution. Others called it an abomination. Nathan frowned, recording her accelerated healing rates. "Your own people turned against you because of a beneficial mutation?" "Fear rarely follows logic, Nathan." She caught his hand, her cool fingers sending an unexpected shiver through him. "The Lasari pride themselves on genetic purity. Those of us who changed were branded as deviants, stripped of our rights. Many were imprisoned for genetic reconditioning. I escaped because I discovered something they desperately wanted to keep hidden." Before she could continue, alarms blared throughout the facility. Nathan's console lit up with urgent messages. His heart nearly stopped as he read them. "Earth Defense Force vessels entering atmosphere. Full facility inspection ordered. All personnel to report for questioning." Vira's grip on his hand tightened. "They found me. The Lasari have agreements with Earth's governments, they must have tracked my ship's debris." Nathan's mind raced. The facility would be locked down within minutes. Every room would be searched, every piece of equipment scanned. And he'd violated enough laws to guarantee a life sentence. "I won't let them take you," he said, surprising himself with the fierce conviction in his voice. "There's an old maintenance tunnel that leads to a backup generator facility 2 kilometers away. If we can reach it." "Nathan." Vira stood, swaying slightly. "You've risked everything for me once already. I can't ask you to dash." "You're not asking." He began quickly gathering essential supplies. "I became part of this the moment I found you in the rain. Besides," he managed a grim smile, "I've got about 1,000 questions about Lasari bioengineering that you haven't answered yet." A sound like thunder shook the building, landing ships. They had minutes at most. Nathan sealed his lab's doors and accessed the facility's systems one last time. AI, Initiate Protocol Omega. Authorization Walsh Delta 79. Warning, Protocol Omega will erase all facility data and trigger emergency evacuation procedures. Confirm? Confirmed. He grabbed Vira's hand. "Hope you're strong enough to run." They barely reached the maintenance tunnel's entrance when the first explosion rocked the facility. Nathan's Protocol Omega wasn't just a data purge, it was a cascade of carefully planned system overloads that would keep their pursuers busy and destroy any evidence of Vira's presence. The tunnel was narrow and dark, their way lit only by the bioluminescent patterns on Vira's skin. As they ran, Nathan's mind spun with the implications of what he'd done. His career was over. He'd be branded a traitor, hunted by his own people. And yet, feeling Vira's hand in his, seeing the trust in those alien eyes, he couldn't bring himself to regret any of it. "The genetic research you mentioned," he panted as they ran. "The secret they wanted to suppress. What was it?" Vira's voice was grim. I discovered that my mutation wasn't random. The Lasari leadership deliberately engineered it centuries ago, creating a superior version of our species. But something went wrong. The changes weren't supposed to manifest for thousands of years. When they began appearing early, the authorities panicked. They tried to hide their own evolution. Nathan's scientific mind reeled at the implications. Worse. They're trying to prevent it, even though their efforts could doom our entire species. The mutation isn't just an improvement, it's an adaptation. One we desperately need. She paused, catching her breath. Our sun is dying, Nathan. Within a generation, its radiation will become lethal to normal Lasari. Those of us with the mutation? We're immune. Another explosion echoed through the tunnel. The hunt was on, and their hunters had resources Nathan couldn't imagine. But as they ran through the darkness, hand in hand, he realized something that should have terrified him but instead filled him with strange hope. He was now part of something far bigger than himself. He'd dreamed of first contact, of discoveries that would change humanity's understanding of the universe. Instead, he'd found himself caught in a struggle that could determine the fate of an entire civilization. And somehow, running for his life beside a blue-skinned alien woman who trusted him with her life, Nathan Walsh felt more alive than he ever had before. The abandoned weather monitoring station stood alone in the mountains, its solar panels glinting in the morning sun. For 2 weeks, it had been Nathan and Vira's sanctuary, a place to catch their breath and plan their next move. Nathan had chosen it well. The facility's electromagnetic shielding, designed to protect sensitive equipment, also helped mask their presence from searching ships. Nathan sat at a makeshift workstation, analyzing blood samples from Vira through a modified microscope. Her cellular structure was unlike anything he'd ever seen, complex and beautiful in its efficiency. But it was her DNA that truly amazed him, a triple helix structure that seemed to rewrite itself in real time. Your genetic code, he said, looking up to find Vira watching him with those mesmerizing silver eyes. It's not just adapted to survive your sun's radiation, it's actively evolving, preparing for even harsher conditions. Vira moved to stand behind him, her cool presence sending a now familiar shiver down his spine. That's what the Council fears most. They believe they can control evolution, keep our species pure. But nature finds a way. She touched the screen, tracing the pattern of her own DNA. Those of us who changed, we're not a mistake, we're the answer to our people's survival. Why didn't they listen? With evidence like this. The same reason your people are hunting us now. Her voice held no bitterness, only sadness. Fear of change. Fear of difference. The Council would rather maintain their power over a dying race than admit they're wrong. Nathan turned to face her, suddenly aware of how close they were. In 2 weeks, he'd learned to read the subtle shifts in her bioluminescent patterns. They pulsed faster now, matching his own quickening heartbeat. When I was young, he said softly, I used to stare at the stars for hours, dreaming of what might be out there. I never imagined. He reached up, hesitantly touching one of the glowing patterns on her cheek. Her skin was cool and smooth, like living silk. Vira leaned into his touch, her patterns brightening. On my world, there's a belief that some souls are born in the wrong stars, that they must travel across the universe to find where they truly belong. Her hand covered his. Nathan, I dash. The proximity alarm shattered the moment. 3 ships were approaching, their energy signatures matching neither Earth nor Lasari vessels. Mercenaries, Vira breathed, her patterns dimming with fear. The Council must have hired them to avoid diplomatic incidents with Earth. Nathan was already moving, grabbing the emergency packs they kept ready. The caves we scouted dash. Won't help. These hunters use bio-trackers. They can follow my genetic signature. Then we'll have to give them a different signature to follow. Nathan rushed to his workstation, fingers flying over the controls. Your blood samples, if I can amplify the radiation signature, create multiple false readings. Vira's eyes widened. The weather monitoring equipment, we could use it to broadcast the false signatures across the mountain range. They worked together in perfect synchronization, Nathan's human intuition complementing Vira's advanced scientific knowledge. As the ships drew closer, they modified the station's equipment, creating a web of false genetic signatures that would lead their hunters on a wild chase through the mountains. But as they finished, Nathan noticed Vira swaying slightly. "What's wrong?" "The radiation shielding," she said, voice strained. "We had to lower it to broadcast the signatures. Without it..." She steadied herself against the wall. "My mutation protects me from my son's radiation, but Earth's is different. I need time to adapt." Nathan's heart clenched. He'd been so focused on the immediate threat, he hadn't considered how Earth's environment might affect her. "How long?" "Hours, maybe days." "Nathan." She looked at him, her silver eyes fierce despite her weakness. "Go. I'll draw them away while you dash." He silenced her with a kiss. Her lips were cool against his, but they warmed as she kissed him back. Her bioluminescent patterns flared brilliantly, filling the room with ethereal light. When they parted, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I told you before, I'm part of this now. We'll find a way." He smiled. "Besides, I'm a scientist. Solving impossible problems is what I do." The mercenary ships were visible now, black shapes against the morning sky. But as Nathan held Vira, watching her patterns pulse in harmony with his heartbeat, he knew with absolute certainty that he was where he belonged. They had found each other across the vastness of space, now they would face whatever came next together. The mountain caves provided temporary shelter, their mineral composition helping to mask Vira's weakening biological signature. Nathan worked tirelessly, converting their limited equipment into a makeshift radiation shield around their small camp. Every few hours, he checked Vira's vital signs, watching with growing concern as her body struggled to adapt to Earth's different radiation spectrum. "Tell me more about your world," he said, trying to keep her conscious and focused as he adjusted the shield's frequency. "Help me understand what we're fighting for." Vira's luminescent patterns flickered weakly, but her silver eyes remained bright. "Imagine cities grown from living crystal, reaching into purple skies. Our binary suns paint everything in eternal twilight." She smiled at a memory. "I was a researcher in the archives of evolution, studying our species' genetic history. That's where I found the truth." She paused, her patterns pulsing with pain. Nathan quickly administered another dose of the modified radiation blockers they'd synthesized, his hand lingering on her too cool skin. "The Council didn't just engineer our evolution," she continued. "They've been systematically erasing every trace of genetic diversity from our population for centuries. All in the name of perfection." Her voice hardened. "But they didn't anticipate our sun's decay. Nature activated the dormant genes they tried to suppress, genes we need to survive." A shadow passed over the cave entrance. They froze, but it was just a bird. The mercenaries were still searching the false trails they'd created, but they wouldn't be fooled forever. "What I don't understand," Nathan said, checking the radiation readings again, "is why hire mercenaries? Why not send their own forces?" "Because Vira started, but was interrupted by a new sound that made both their hearts stop, the distinctive hum of a Lasari shuttle's engines. Nathan peered carefully out of the cave. His blood ran cold. A sleek silver ship was landing in the valley below, its design far more advanced than the mercenary vessels. Its surface seemed to flow like liquid metal, adapting to the atmosphere around it. "They did send their own forces," Vira whispered. "The mercenaries were just to flush us out." Her patterns flared with sudden urgency. "Nathan, that's a genetic purity division ship. They're not here to capture me, they're here to eliminate any trace that someone like me could exist. As if confirming her words, figures emerged from the ship wearing environment suits that seemed to absorb light. They carried weapons Nathan had never seen before, devices that pulsed with ominous energy. Genetic erasure units, Vira explained, her voice shaking. They don't just kill, they break down the target's DNA, removing any trace of contaminated genetics. She grabbed Nathan's arm. If they find us, they'll kill you too. Any human who's had prolonged contact with my kind could be corrupted by our genetics. Nathan's mind raced. The cave system was extensive, but with their advanced scanning technology, the Lasari would find them eventually. They needed a plan. Then he noticed something about the Lasari troops' movements. They were careful, methodical, and they always stayed in the shadows. Vira, your people evolved in twilight, right? Under two suns? She nodded, then her eyes widened as she followed his thinking. Direct sunlight, it's too intense for them. That's why they're wearing those suits. And why you're having trouble adapting to Earth's radiation. Nathan quickly began gathering their equipment. But your mutation is already working to protect you. If we can accelerate that process. We'd need a massive burst of focused solar energy, Vira said. But the radiation could kill me before the adaptation kicks in. Nathan smiled grimly. Remember that solar collection array we passed? The one powering the old research station? He pulled up a map on their portable computer. It's designed to concentrate and store solar energy. With some modifications. We could create a radiation pulse strong enough to overload their protective suits, Vira finished. But Nathan, the exposure, even with my mutation, I might not survive. He took her face in his hands, memorizing every luminescent pattern. You said your mutation makes you stronger, lets you adapt. So adapt. Fight. Because I didn't cross paths with the most amazing person in the universe just to lose you now. Her patterns brightened as she pressed her forehead to his. You humans, she said softly. Always defying impossible odds. That's not human nature, he replied. That's love. They shared one more kiss before beginning their preparations. Outside, the Lasari forces methodically combed the mountainside, unaware that their quarry was about to turn their own evolutionary advantages against them. As Nathan and Vira worked to modify the solar array, both knew they were running out of time. But they also knew that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe isn't advanced technology or genetic engineering, it's the simple, unshakable conviction that love is worth any risk. Dawn painted the mountains gold as Nathan made the final adjustments to the solar collection array. They had worked through the night, modifying the equipment to create a focused burst of radiation that would overwhelm the Lasari forces' protective suits. But the same burst could prove fatal to Vira if her mutation couldn't adapt quickly enough. The targeting system is ready, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Once they're in position, we'll only have one shot at this. Vira stood at the edge of the platform, her blue skin almost luminous in the growing light. Her patterns pulsed with a new rhythm Nathan had never seen before, not fear, not determination, but something like destiny. You know, she said softly, among my people, there's a theory that consciousness affects quantum probability. That when two minds are perfectly aligned, they can actually influence the fabric of reality. She turned to him, silver eyes reflecting the sunrise. I never believed it until I met you. The distant whine of Lasari weapons cut off Nathan's response. The Genetic Purity Division had found their false trail, and they were systematically destroying every cave and crevice that could harbor fugitives. The genetic erasure units hummed with deadly purpose, breaking down all traces of contaminated DNA. They're getting closer, Nathan said, checking the array's power levels. Another 10 minutes until full charge. Commander Walsh. A new voice echoed across the mountain, amplified by advanced technology. A tall figure in an elaborate environment suit stepped into view below their position. "I am Executor Van of the Genetic Purity Division. Surrender the deviant, and you may yet avoid genetic cleansing." Nathan felt Vira tense beside him. "Van led the first purges," she whispered. "He's the one who discovered my research about the sun's decay." "Your species is young," Van continued, his tone almost paternal. "You cannot understand the importance of genetic purity. The deviant's mutation is a cancer that must be excised for the good of all." "Funny thing about cancer," Nathan called back, buying time as the array charged. "Sometimes it's not the disease that kills you, it's the body's own immune response overreacting." He gestured at the valley below, where Van's forces were destroying everything in their path. "Look at what you're doing to your own people. Your own world. Our world is dying." Van's composure cracked. "These deviants are nature's mistake, a random mutation dash." "You're wrong." Vira's voice rang out, clear and strong. "Show them, Nathan." Nathan activated the holographic display they'd prepared, projecting his analysis of Vira's DNA into the sky above the array. The triple helix structure rotated slowly, its complex patterns clear even to non-scientists. "This isn't random mutation," Nathan announced. "This is directed evolution. Your ancestors engineered these changes into your genetic code centuries ago. They knew your sun would decay. They gave you the tools to survive." "Lies." Van raised his weapon. "Our ancestors achieved genetic perfection. We will not allow their work to be undone by dash." The array hummed to full power. Nathan's hand hovered over the activation switch, but Vira stopped him. "It has to be me," she said. "My people need to see that we choose this evolution. That we're not afraid." She kissed him quickly. "Trust in us. In this." Her patterns pulsed in perfect rhythm with his heartbeat. Before he could stop her, Vira stepped into the focus point of the array. Nathan slammed the activation switch, and the world turned white. The concentrated burst of solar radiation overwhelmed the Lasari forces' protective suits. They fell back, their weapons shorting out, their carefully maintained genetic purity suddenly exposed to the raw power of evolution. But Nathan had eyes only for Vira. She stood in the heart of the radiation burst, her blue skin absorbing and transforming the energy. Her bioluminescent patterns blazed like captured stars, forming new configurations he'd never seen before. She was changing, adapting before his eyes. When the light faded, Vira still stood. Her blue skin now shimmered with iridescent patterns that seemed to capture and reflect sunlight. She opened her silver eyes, and smiled. "The radiation," Nathan breathed, checking her vital signs. "You're not just surviving it. I'm transforming it." She held up her hand, where the light played across her skin in impossible ways. "This is what we were meant to become. Not just resistant to our dying sun, but able to harness its changing energy." Below, the Lasari forces were recovering, but something had changed. Their own genetic codes, suppressed for so long, had been awakened by the burst. One by one, patches of blue began appearing on their skin. "Executor Van," Vira called out. "You wanted genetic purity? Look around you. Look at what we truly are." Van stared at his own hands, where the first traces of blue were spreading. This is impossible." "This is evolution," Nathan said, taking Vira's hand. "You can fight it and watch your people die, or you can embrace it and help them survive." The next few hours were a blur of negotiations, explanations, and careful scientific documentation. The Lasari Council, faced with irrefutable evidence in a rapidly evolving population, had no choice but to acknowledge the truth their ancestors had tried to prepare them for. Months later, Nathan stood with Vira on a balcony overlooking New Singapore, where the first joint human Lasari research center was nearing completion. The setting sun painted the sky in colors that reminded him of her homeworld's eternal twilight. The first generation of naturally blue Lasari children was born yesterday, Vira said, her patterns dancing with joy. A whole generation that will never know the fear and hatred we faced. Nathan pulled her close, marveling at how her evolved skin now played with Earth's sunlight, creating tiny auroras where they touched. And the genetic treatments for the others? Working better than we hoped. Within a decade, all Lasari will be able to survive our sun's decay. She traced one of his laugh lines with a cool finger. Of course, some of us have found even better reasons to evolve. As they kissed, their shadows merged into one on the balcony floor. Above them, the first stars of evening appeared, distant suns waiting to be explored by whatever humanity and the Lasari would become together. In the end, Nathan reflected, love truly was the ultimate adaptation, breaking down barriers between worlds, between species, between what was and what could be. And somewhere in the vast chamber of space, two distant suns continued their eternal dance, waiting for their children to come home changed, evolved, and finally unafraid of difference.